Pete Murray, thank you very much for joining me.
Great
Simply
to be
put,
here.
is the winner of this fight the best heavyweight in the world?
Absolutely. This is the number one heavyweight fight in MMA, event of the year. This will determine who's the best of the best in MMA in the heavyweight weight class worldwide.
You asked about not promoting this fight as the lineal heavyweight championship of the world. Why was that?
I mean, we didn't make a conscious decision not to market it that way, but essentially that's what it is, and fans have spoken. So we're proud. This is a new belt for us, the PFL Super Fights belt. This belt will have to be won and defended over time. So, but this is the fight of the year: Nagano versus Ferreira on DAZN worldwide, ESPN in the U.S. at the Mayadeen. Saturday, October 19th. It's going to be a mega event.
And you mentioned that you were the first MMA organisation to come to Saudi Arabia. Do you believe that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has overtaken Las Vegas as the fight capital of the world?
I think there's plenty to share in the fight game, but KSA has created a cornerstone and as the fight capital globally of the world, and it's doing great things for the sport. I mean, it just means that fighters will have more opportunities, more events to be staged on the calendar, and mega events. That's what we're excited about. I mean, when you have a fight here in Riyadh or in Jeddah or in KSA, it's a big event. It's a spectacle. So, we're looking forward to staging this event with our partners at Ministry of Sport and all the other, stakeholders, including the Saudi Federation, MMA Federation.
A huge selling point of the PFL is how you pay fighters, the amount of opportunities fighters get because of different leagues that you've got. But a big reason why I love MMA is because you used to know exactly who the best fighter in each division was. Is there any thoughts to streamline the process when it comes to the divisions that you've got in the PFL? You've currently got 4 different types of divisions or leagues.
Yeah, well, we have 4 franchises. So our Super Fights division, our Champion Series, with the Bellator fighters at the moment. We have our global season, and then our International Champions League. And PFL Europe, talkSPORT's been following it. We appreciate it. But you saw what we did with Dakota.
Yeah.
So Dakota, we signed her. We helped further develop her in the sport in PFL Europe. She earned her way to PFL Europe at PFL Europe Championship. She became champion, and then we supported her, and she ascended to the global season. She's doing great. She's in the PFL Europe Championship in Lyon. So she's dancing with the very best in the women's 125. And that's an example of our system. Identifying great athletes who are looking for consistent top competition on major media platforms and the opportunity to prove themselves and earn their way to become regional champions and then have a pathway to the global season. That we're creating and implementing the Champions League of MMA. That's the system we're creating.
And in terms of the hierarchy of those franchises, would a belt like this, the heavyweight championship that's online on Saturday, be the premier belt within the organisation?
Absolutely. This is the top of the top.
Okay.
This is it.
And in terms of how Francis will go about defending that belt, if he did win it, or if Hennon wins that belt, what does that look like in 2025?
Yeah, no, we're talking about, there's probably 3 possibilities, for some current PFL fighters to, have that follow-up opportunity as a contender, for the Super Fights belt next year. More details to come. We'll be talking about that in the broadcast.
Can we get an exclusive? You mentioned there's a big announcement to be made tomorrow.
There is.
What is that announcement? Can you give us a clue?
I can't do it. I can't do it. I appreciate it.
A little clue?
No, it has to do with the World Championship. We haven't announced where that's going to be. We'll announce that tomorrow, among other, sort of new happenings.
And from the UK point of view, Fabian Edwards takes on Johnny Eblen. That's a huge fight.
Huge.
In my opinion, I think Johnny Eblen's is one of the best middleweights in the world, regardless of organisation. How do you think that fight goes? Do you think it'll be as explosive as the first fight?
Oh, no, it's going to be explosive. I mean, this rematch is going to be great. We shuffled the deck. We decided to put it on this card because we wanted this to be the very best card of the year. And, that fight is befitting to be, coupled with Hainan versus Francis and Cyborg versus Lissa. kind of leads into the co-main event. It's going to be great. I mean, 3 world title fights on one card.
Cyborg versus Larissa, huge fight. Cyborg, it's more about the quality of opponents as opposed to the quantity. She fought once in 2022, once in last year, and it's her first fight this year as well. If you look at Larissa, she's been very active, 11-fight win streak. Is this a clash of not only styles, but clash in terms of where these fighters are in terms of their career?
Yeah, well, Cyborg is the best in the world. I mean, she's got 4 belts. She wants this belt as part of her legacy. She's an active fighter, while she hasn't fought in MMA with us as of yet. This is her debut with the PFL. She's been active in boxing. She's always training. I mean, she's an incredible athlete. She's ready to go always. And for Larissa, this is about making her mark. 2-time PFL champion, women's 155, women's 145. She's ready for the fight. I think this is going to be an incredible fight, and I'm not sure how it's going to go. We'll see.
The PFL were incredibly gracious, allowing Francis to cross over and take on Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua, establish himself as the baddest man on the planet despite the losses in those fights. What does Francis' relationship with the PFL look like beyond this fight with Helen Ferreira?
Listen, he's the champ. He's an elite athlete with us. He's exclusive in MMA with the PFL. We're going to stage other big MMA events with Francis in the cage, continuing his career not only in boxing but in MMA. But what we're really excited about is launching PFL Africa next year with Francis. He's the chairman. We have a roster that I want to say it's almost finalized. We haven't made the announcements, and Francis is part of that process. We're also in the process of finalizing our schedule, the countries where we're going to stage events in Africa, across the continent, as well as wrapping up our distribution. So there'll be a lot to share before the end of the year, including with Francis at the helm, ushering in the next generation of great African fighters who don't have to leave the continent like Francis did. And they get to stay in Africa, train in Africa, and get paid as professionals and become champions representing their countries. And that's very much what we're building. That's the spirit. These fighters are shaking the flag. They're representing their countries, whether it be Nigeria, whether it be Rwanda, whether it be Cameroon. So it's going to be fun.
You mentioned that fighters from France who've got African descent have got the opportunity to maybe fight for PFL Africa contracts. How important is that to the diaspora? Because I'm an Englishman of Ghanaian descent, and that's very important in terms of recognizing that they are French athletes, but they are also from Africa as well.
Yeah, it really starts with the athlete. I mean, if they have that, that's part of their heritage, and they have ties to Africa and that passion, and they want to, continue to, stay linked. We support that. I mean, but not all the PFL Africa fighters will be living outside of Africa and training outside of Africa. We'll mix it up. I would say the majority of the fighters will be from Africa, train in Africa, live in Africa. It's very important to Francis. But we're also going to recognize and give those other fighters throughout Europe and the rest of the world who, have, African ties and heritage, and they want to continue to fuel that because they didn't have that opportunity before we launched. And that's the conversation. Had you talked to Cedric Doumbé, had that been had PFL Africa been an opportunity for him early days, what would have that been like? So that's what this is all about.
And in terms of Francis, we saw him and Helen face off a couple of months ago. The man in the middle of that face-off was Jake Paul. Will we ever see him in the smart cage?
Absolutely, 2025. He's got a big fight against Mike Tyson. That's going to be epic. But following that, we'll be talking to Jake, and he's making his plans and focusing also on MMA and making his debut at the PFL in 2025.
You guys got so many strings to your bows, so many different franchises. How integral is that crossover aspect of combat sports to your business?
Yeah, no, we love it. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what makes it interesting, right? It's mixed martial arts, and there are various disciplines. So we think crossover fighters coming into MMA is interesting, particularly from boxing, and then modified rules. We're talking about that and how we stage new and fun different events and bring some innovation to it.
We've been speaking to Dan Hardy. He's kind of dampen the idea of cross-promotional fights in mixed martial arts. But like I mentioned, you've got some of the best fighters in the world, Francis Ngannou, Johnny Eblen. Will we ever see that happening in maybe a PFL versus UFC?
We love it. At the end of the day, it's the world of sport. It happens in It happens in global football or soccer. It happens in other sports. So we're a proponent of it. And, Francis has been outspoken about it, as has John Jones. A lot of conversation here with partners in KSA, and, we're supportive. It's really up to the UFC.
We saw Queensbury versus Matchroom happen in boxing in terms of that cross promotion, 5 versus 5. If we were to do it PFL versus UFC, do your guys come out on top?
Absolutely. Our roster's second to none. And that's what sport's all about, right? So, over a third of our roster is ranked in the top 25 in the world in their respective weight classes. Our roster is really second to none. UFC's had a head start on us, and kudos to them. They're establishing the sport and their position and what they've done for athletes in the sport. This is a growth sport. There's more room for more than one leader. Fans, all they want is great fighters, great fights. We give them a different version of the sport. We have differentiation with our sport format, our technology, the smart cage. So, there's more room.
Yeah. Last one from me, talkSPORT's very own Brendan Loughnane advanced to the featherweight PFL finals. Again, he was the champion in 2022. He's got a tough test in the final. How do you reckon Brendan gets on?
Listen, Brendan is always training. He's not always just talking. He's always training. And it is the toughest test in MMA. You talk to Brendan, you talk to other fighters, you're talking about, getting to the championship, 4 fights in 8 months. It's a training grind. You're always sort of in camp. And it's not for everyone. It's only for, in my view, very special elite fighters who not only could take it on and become champion, but come back and do it again. So, kudos to Brendan for stepping up again.
And in a word, Pete, what do you expect on Saturday in terms of the Battle of the Giants?
Oh, it's going to be a great event. In addition to the fights at the top of the card, we have rising stars on the bottom of the card in terms of the run-up to the pay-per-view. In addition, we have Ariel Hawani Vision. He's got some special guests, so exclusive for DAZN.
Gronk as well?
Gronk is joining the game and the conversation. He knows something about getting hit and hitting, but he's a big fan of MMA. He's a big fan of Francis Ngannou. He wanted to be a part of it, and we're excited for him and Jake Paul to get it on with Ariel and other guests on Hawani Vision. That'll be great.
Guys, that was Pete Murray. Make sure you're locked into talkSPORT for the rest of the week. We've got you covered for PFL Battle of the Giants.